Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Seattle. It's good to see everybody. Everybody doing well? This is awesome. It's good to have you here. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Seattle. My name is Mark Wright. For visitors, I'm the president of the club this year. It's so great to have everybody here today. If you're visiting, you should know we start with inspiration and song. If you're uncomfortable singing, just mouth the words and it'll be all okay in a short time. So Trish Bostrom is leading our inspiration for today. After that, Howard Crabtree and Burr Stewart will lead us in America the Beautiful. So first up, Trish.
Please bow your heads and pray with me. Dear God, we thank you for Stein Kruse and for the large company that he leads. We thank you for all the jobs his company creates in Seattle. We pray deeply for peace in the world, for peace in our hearts and an end to violence. Make us even more resolute to do good work in our city and world. Make us each a beacon of light for hope in the world. We thank you for this food and ask you to bless it. We also thank you for all the people serving us today. We pray that you will continue to raise up great entrepreneurial corporate leaders in our country, such as Stein. Amen.
So we've got a great program set up today. Our short program today features Gregg Hanscom, executive editor of Crosscut. He'll be talking about the Crosscut Courage Awards, and of course our main program is Stein Kruse. He is the group CEO of Holland America Group and Carnival UK. Something like 65,000 people report to Stein. I wanted to identify him as a travel kingpin, but that probably wasn't the right title. But Stein, it's great to have you here for the main program. So let's get to Gregg. Gregg, come on up. Our short program features Gregg Hanscom, executive editor of Crosscut and KCTS 9 Public TV. Gregg is talking about tomorrow's 2017 Crosscut Courage Awards. The event is really to reach across political, social, and cultural, even ideological lines to build bridges and common ground and to recognize those people making a difference. Please give a warm Seattle for welcome to Gregg Hanscom.
Appreciate it. Hello, and thank you so much for having me back. It's not often that I get invited back after the first time. It's appropriate that I am up here before Stein because I currently oversee the smallest media empire in Seattle. Not quite 65,000, I think it's 18. I am the executive editor at Cascade Public Media, and this is a nonprofit. It's an umbrella nonprofit that has sort of three main channels. One of them is KCTS 9 Public Television, which you all probably know. I hope you do. One of them is a millennial-based media outlet we call Spark Public. And then the third piece is Crosscut. Crosscut is an online news outlet that covers Seattle, Puget Sound, and the Pacific Northwest, kind of in that order. It's a small operation. We focus a lot of our energy right here on Seattle, just because we don't have a lot of resources to spread around. But it is an organization that is growing at a time when a lot of newsrooms and news organizations in this country are shrinking. And the way that we do that is by engaging with our audience and audiences in fresh and different ways. I think gone are the days when you could sort of sit behind a desk and do interviews by phone and sort of tell the city what it needed to know and what it should care about. I think that to run a media organization today, you've got to find creative new ways of getting your message out to the world, and you also have to get your people out of the office in more meaningful ways. And that's not just the reporters who are out there doing the shoe leather work of reporting every day, but that is the editors as well, and the people who are really in charge of kind of the vision of what you're doing. So we do a lot of that. Of course, we've got the television station. But we do a lot of work to sort of push people to our digital products, the daily news product at Crosscut, and also to the sort of multitude of video offerings on kcts9.org. But we also do events. And I think we've really made a name, especially for Crosscut, with some of the events that we do, that we use as ways to sort of connect with our community, to reach a broader audience, oftentimes an audience that's not inclined to watch television or even sort of catch us online. And we also use these events to raise money, because as business people know, the business of the news is a perilous one right now. Do I have a clicker? Okay. If someone has a clicker, you could click. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. But that's all right. We can do it that way. So I wanted to tell you actually about two different events that we've got coming up. One of them is the Courage Awards. This is an annual breakfast. We're in our 5th year of doing the Courage Awards. And this is Crosscut's yearly opportunity to recognize members of our community who have done bold things in business, in tech, elected office, arts and culture. We've got a whole list. We've got 6 different award winners this year. And it's sort of our opportunity. You know, I think our mission as an organization, our motto is that, that an informed public is critical to solving the issues of our time. So our mission is to help create a more informed public, and to recognize those who are making our region a better place. So the Courage Awards are just that. Let me just tell you a few people who we are recognizing this year. David Harris currently works for the city of Seattle, but is a tech entrepreneur and one of the founders of Hack the CD. Hack the Central District. His mission right now is to connect specifically African Americans with jobs in the tech industry. And he works with African American community from sort of grade school all the way up through college to sort of create a pipeline to get more people of color into the tech industry. Let's see, I have a clicker now. We are also this year recognizing the Gang of 4. Longtime Seattleites will recognize these characters. These are 4 men who came together in the 1960s as a united front, really working for civil rights and communities of color. There's only one surviving member of the Gang of 4, Larry Gossett. And Larry, of course, is a King County councilman. And he'll be accepting the award tomorrow morning for the whole Gang of 4. It's an interesting model in these times when we find ourselves and our community is so fractured. This was an example of 4 men from 4 very different communities coming together and working for a common cause. And the Lifetime Achievement Award this year will be Bill Ruckelshaus. You may know Bill as a champion of the environment. He was actually the very first administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency way back in the day. He also was chased out of the White House during Watergate. He either quit or was fired, depending on who you talk to. But the President Nixon ordered him to fire the special counsel who was about to uncover Watergate, and Ruckelshaus refused, tendered his resignation, and was shown the door sort of at the same time. So Bill's going to be accepting the Lifetime Achievement Award. I wanted to give you sort of an early heads up to, I'll just say, so that's the Courage Awards. We do have a handful of tables, we have a handful of seats still available. It's tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. So if you are interested in coming, first you need to stop by and see Daryl and get one of those crisp $100 bills, and then come see me, and I will set you up with a ticket to the Courage Awards. We'd love to have you. We really do have some space, and we will make space for more if we need to. Okay. Wow, this is quick. Okay, I've got a minute to tell you about this. This is the Crosscut Festival, and I'm going to make this really quick. The Crosscut Festival will be February 2nd and 3rd. This is meant to be Seattle's version of the New Yorker Festival or the Aspen Ideas Festival. Sort of a cross between, TED Talks, literary readings, creative events. There's going to be music. There will be arts. Mainly, there will be big-name people from all over the region, including we're going to have a round table of West Coast governors. We are going to have a whole session with the mayors of Cascadia, Vancouver, BC, Seattle, we hope, and in Portland, Oregon. We're going to have members of Congress, and we are going to put these people on stage with some of the best journalists in the region to have conversations that, with any luck, will make news as we go. So we're going to have journalists not just from Crosscut and KCTS, but from other news outlets across the region. My time is running out, but here are a couple of quick details about the Crosscut Festival. 1,500 people in attendance. 1,000 of those will be college students. So this is really targeted to a younger audience. It's going to be a great couple of days. Happy to share more details with you as they come together. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Greg. For those younger members, our 75th anniversary project for this club was to help build that building, KCTS's building over by Seattle Center. So that was our project. So we go deep with KCTS, and we love the work that you guys are doing. Greg, thank you. So our main program today, Leslie Helm, the executive editor of Seattle Business Magazine, is going to be having a conversation with Stein Kruse. And Hamilton, our VP of Programs, and I decided Stein was a really interesting fit for our leadership series because, as you'll hear him say, he went from a fairly high level of leadership to an incredibly high level of leadership, and there was a transformation that took place during that time. You all know the products that he operates in Holland America and Carnival. So I'll tell you a little bit about Leslie to set the stage. Leslie Helm is a veteran reporter and editor with more than 20 years' experience working for local and national publications. As I said, he is now executive editor of Seattle Business Magazine. He was also executive editor of Washington CEO Magazine. So please give a warm Seattle 4 welcome to Leslie Helm and Stein Kruse.
You know, one of the greatest pleasures of covering business in Seattle is the incredible, rich, diverse backgrounds of the executives that we get to talk to. And, you know, Stein Kruse is a great example. He was born in Oslo, Norway. He was attracted to the hospitality business while in high school working as a busboy at a Westin hotel. And after serving
You've done some seriously deep digging here.
Yeah. After serving in the Norwegian Navy for his compulsory military service, he came to study here in the United States at Purdue University. On graduation, he became a management trainee for a Norwegian line. He is one of the few executives in the cruise business that has actually worked on a ship. Today, Stein is the Group CEO for Holland America Group and Carnival UK, and is responsible for 65,000 employees worldwide. From his Seattle offices, he now oversees the operations of several dozen ships for Princess Cruises, Holland American Line, Seabourn, Carnival UK, and PO Australia. He was also just last year the winner of our Executive Excellence Awards at Seattle Business Magazine, and I just wanted to let you know that we are open for nominations. It's a program to award outstanding C-suite executives, and we'd love your nominations. So I just wanted to start, Stein, by asking you, we were talking at the table earlier today about, this evening, about how extensive your operations. I understand you even have a railroad, you have ground operations, dozens of ships. How do you manage something that's large and sprawling?
Very well, I would like to think. But I was saying to Mark, I have the privilege of being the person at the forefront of these 65,000 people, but that's really the magic sauce, is the people that I have. We have 6 cruise lines. Thank you for pointing them out. Princess Cruises, Holland American Line, Cunard Line, P&O Australia, and Seabourn. And those 65,000 people, about 60,000 of them are at sea, 5,000 of them work in Seattle, Los Angeles, Southampton, Rotterdam, and Sydney, Australia. And we also have, 13 hotels up in Alaska and the Yukon territories in Canada. And we have a number of trains running up there. We have 300 motor coaches. And it's a global operation, 365, 24/7. The sun never sets on our empire, but I have 65,000 people that run that, and they run it very well, and we're organized, and when that machinery works, it is a beautiful thing. And when it creaks a little bit, things can quickly go awry, and that's when I have to step in.
You started, I understand, from the very bottom. As a management trainee, I understand you did virtually every conceivable job. So what did that experience bring to your leadership? I mean, what lessons did you learn from that?
Absolutely. So, when I grew up in Norway, and my childhood was a great childhood, and I had a wonderful upbringing, but we didn't have a lot of money, and I had to work when I was in high school. So I was a busboy at a hotel. Actually, this is true. It was at the Westin Hotel. It opened in 1973 in Oslo, Norway. It's called the Radisson SAS Hotel today. Maybe somebody has stayed there. And I was a busboy at the Café Royal, and I had just gotten my driver's license, and I had borrowed my grandfather's old VW, and it had a heating unit that worked in 2 settings, off and on. And it took exactly 12 minutes for the on to actually be working, and it took about 15 minutes to get from where I lived to get to the restaurant in the morning. And in February in Oslo, those 12 minutes before the heater kicked in were incredibly cold. So I learned a lot about persistence, perseverance, certainly humility, but also that you have to get the job done. And I've never asked anybody to do something that I wasn't myself prepared to do. And I think in terms of leadership, that's what you do. When you lead people, you have to have direction, you have to know where you're going, because you're just leading people. If you're going off a cliff, it's not a great idea. So you got to know, what the idea is to get you to where you're going. And I think I learned that. I learned that is important, to have objectives, to have goals, to know what you have to do, and to be prepared to do it.
You recently said that one of your great, proudest things was creating these memories for millions of customers. And in fact, you have something like 25 million customer days, is that right? That's
in the Holland America group, and then we have another 10 million or so in Carnival, UK.
Okay, yeah. So that creating that customer experience, tell me a little bit about what that takes and where you focused.
So we are, first of all, I work in a fantastic business. We're in the business of providing a tremendously enjoyable vacation experience. And so our goal and our objective is to make sure that we deliver that. We want to, our objective is to exceed what your expectations are as a traveling public. Across the 53 ships that I operate, across the thousands of other assets that we have, all these people are in charge of doing that, to exceed guest expectations. And if we do that, we will continue to be immensely successful. We are successful, we're very large, we're very profitable. We continue to invest in our business. We have right now a capital program underway in the billions of dollars. And we continue to invest in it because the traveling public believes in what we do. And as long as I and the 65,000 people that I have the privilege to work with can continue to deliver that, then good things will follow. It's a relatively simple recipe. Giving some frontline empowerment, giving direction, allowing people to make decisions, but making sure that those experiences that we promise, and we're very good at marketing. I've got good friends here in the room that are in marketing. They know what it's all about. It's selling the promise. But once you've sold it, you better deliver it. Otherwise, you're not going to come back as a customer. You're not going to get the word of mouth, and that's what we do.
So, for example, you've taken on the additional responsibility of the UK operations of the Princess Cruise. What experiences from Holland America will you take there, and specific?
Right. So those are two very, very well-established companies. One is called P&O Cruises, Peninsular and Oriental. Some of you might know that name. It goes back to the Raj, back to India in the 1800s. It was the immigrant, basically, fleet that took the people from the British Empire to and from India. Today, P&O is the largest travel company in the United Kingdom and has 9 phenomenal ships that go all over the world with almost exclusively British customers. Then there's another company called Cunard Line, which is quite well known. There's 3 ships, Queen Mary, which is the flagship, Queen Victoria, and Queen Elizabeth. And it's a higher-end product. But what I took from what I formed here and is bringing over there is just some of those simple things that I think are part of what is working for our group. It's the ability to create efficiencies. When you have large scale, then you can start creating efficiencies. Allowing free flow of communication. I'm really big on communication, collaboration, coordination of efforts, and so forth. And is one of the reasons why, and we'll probably touch on this, we just opened a new facility here in Seattle, which was purpose-built for us, because here in Seattle I have about 1,200 people right down the street, and we opened our new offices over there. And one of the things I said was, I've become very accustomed to being very well taken care of. I travel a lot, I stay in very nice places, I fly first class, I'm met by limousines at the airport. I am very privileged. I'm incredibly privileged. I didn't realize how privileged I would be when I was a busboy. But that is not the important thing. The important thing is that I need to lead by example. So one of the things I did is I eliminated offices. There's no office in our building. We all have the same type of desk, and I put articulating desks on all the people's desks so you can stand or sit, and it's an open workspace. And if somebody wants to come and say hello to me, they just come over. I'm at a desk just like everybody else. So it's that concept of being available, being able to communicate, collaborate, coordinate your activities. Hey, Leslie, what's going on? I heard, that creates a unique setting. And I'm sort of bringing that, if you will, over to the Carnival UK operation and learning a lot from them in the process, which I can bring back here.
That's interesting, creating the culture that you talked about. So how do you make sure that culture grows and is nurtured from day to day? I mean, and for example, what kind of characteristics do you look for when you're hiring somebody?
So you're touching on the word culture, and you can never really define culture. And if you set out to create a culture, you'll fail. But having said that, culture is critical. I just read a book, and if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend it. It's called Work Rules, or Work Rules. It's written by Laszlo Bloch, who was employee number 6 at Google, and he's in charge of people at Google, Work Rules. And he uses the phrase that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and there's a lot of truth to that. If you have, in my case, 65,000 people who understand what they're supposed to do, they're empowered to do it. You don't create an environment where people, if they don't do the right thing, they're blamed for it. You try to grow them, to teach them, you try to give them lessons learned in the process. A no-blame culture allows a lot of good things to happen. You allow people the freedom to experience and experiment and sometimes fail. It's a lot easier to ask for forgiveness than permission sometimes, and I encourage that. If you're waiting for direction and to be told what to do and how to do it, you might not thrive quite as well in the culture that I'd like to believe that we have. But if you're willing to take some risks and willing to experiment a little bit and say, oh shucks, that didn't work, but you're committed to the objectives and the goals and you understand what those are, you'll thrive in the environment that I think that my people are able to create.
And if you're interviewing a prospective, executive, what kind of questions do you have to figure out whether they're going to fit in that kind of environment? So
at the point I am now in my career, I have, as I said, a lot of people, and we're very large organizations, so we have lots of layers, of course. We're not bureaucratic, or at least I'd like to think we're not bureaucratic, but I don't necessarily interview a whole lot of people anymore. But when I was interviewing and hiring people, I didn't necessarily spend a lot of time on their resume. I mean, you assume by the time they reached me that they've been vetted for all that stuff. So I was trying to look at the person. I was trying to listen. One of the things I always say is great leaders, they listen much better than they talk. If you can understand what it is that you're hearing around you and allowing others to say things so you pick it up. So I talk to the people. I try to understand who they are. I try to gauge, if you will, their ability to respond to things I say and listen to how they say it and how they phrase things. Because the resume is just a piece of paper, and it's a summary of your qualifications from an educational and work experience point of view, but it doesn't really tell you who Leslie is. You learn Leslie by speaking to Leslie and looking at Leslie and listening to Leslie. So that was kind of the approach I had.
When we spoke about 4 or 5 years ago, you talked about this sort of interesting Carnival culture where you have different operating groups that essentially compete, but they also collaborate in different ways. I was sort of curious how that works.
Yeah, that's a great question, Leslie. We're essentially now 3 groups in our publicly traded corporation. We are, if you don't know who we are, we're Carnival Corporation and PLC. We're a dual-listed company on the New York Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange. Our market cap is about 50 billion, and we're immensely profitable. And we're divided into 3 groups. Carnival Cruise Line, based in Miami. My group, which is based wherever I happen to be, which is, today's is in Seattle. And then Costa Group, which is headquartered in Genoa and Germany. So there are 3 heads of those 3 groups. And then we report up to a board of directors at Carnival Corporation and PLC, which happens to have a board meeting here in Seattle next week. So I have a lot of, for me, important people coming into town. I was just looking at the weather forecast, and it's going to be absolutely horrible next week. So the traditional commentary from my board about, Seattle, why do you live here? It rains all the time. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of those. But anyway, the way that we interact with the board and with the leadership group at Carnival Corporation and my 2 colleagues and myself, it's incredibly open. It's competitive, but not sort of I gotcha. It's more, here's what I'm doing. If it works for you, you can take it. If we develop something, a software, an application, a service product, it's yours if you want it, and if you don't want it, that's fine too. And we're very nimble. We get together a lot. We have what we call a global leadership team. There are 7 of us on that leadership team. We meet every week. Most of the time it's by video because the 7 of us are in different places all the time. It's every Thursday morning, 8 o'clock Seattle time, 11 o'clock East Coast time, 4 o'clock UK time, 5 o'clock Genoa, Hamburg time. And we meet. So if we're together, we meet, and if we're not, we meet by video. So tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, I'll have the meeting, and we'll talk about what has happened, what's going to happen. Here's some things that has, really resulted in something really positive, and here's something negative, and we spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours just going through that. So it's an incredible, open, transparent, and it's almost the only way you can run a company the size of ours. The global corporation, we are 125,000 employees, 65,000 of them are mine, and we have 103 ships and dozens of hotels and God knows what else we own, and the only way you can manage that and communicate effectively is by having a really open and transparent and frequent communications.
You've talked about sort of the interesting element of the cruise business is that you had a period when Alaska had imposed some additional regulations, and you were just able to move the ships from Alaska to Europe. You're able to avoid regulations in a way. And I'm curious, you mentioned that Carnival's currently headquartered here, but suggesting perhaps it might not in the future. I'm curious that there's been a lot of talk with Amazon building a second headquarters, and sort of the Seattle environment, some feelings that it's becoming less friendly to business. Is there a possibility that sometime in the future you might reconsider being in Seattle, headquartered in Seattle?
Yeah, so if I left that impression by saying it is wherever I am, that was not my intention. My intention was simply to say that I manage my business where I have an office in LA, I have an office in Southampton, UK. So no, Seattle is home for the Holland America Group for as long as I can imagine. And also, just to correct you, thank you. We didn't move the ships in Alaska because of regulation. We moved the ships in Alaska out of Alaska, and I had several conversations with the then governor of Alaska about this, was because they had a very small advocacy group that decided to institute a punitive tax strictly on our passengers. And we felt that that was completely wrong. And I told the governor that I had no issue with paying for things that would benefit our guests, but just simply punitive taxation for us to bring visitors that his economy benefits from seemed preposterous to me. And so I said, if we don't get some kind of compromise on that, then I'll reduce the number of ships going to Alaska. And we did, and then we found a compromise, and now the ships are back, and we're doing really well. So,
one of the fascinating things about the cruise business are the ships themselves. And I understand you actually get involved in the actual development of the ships as a product, so to speak. And I think you were involved in the Majestic Princess that's aimed at the Chinese market. Yep. Can you tell me a little bit about how that culture and that customer experience gets translated into a ship and what it offers?
Sure. Well, that's actually one of the most fun things I get to do. I get to do a lot of exciting things, but we build ships, and building ships it's kind of like a labor of love. It takes a long time, and you have to try to anticipate what these ships are going to be delivering 10, 15, 20 years down the road, because the lifetime of a ship is quite lengthy, and you have to try to anticipate consumer wants and desires, and look at what's happening elsewhere in society, build in technology and what have you. So the whole aspect of shipbuilding is very near and dear to my heart. And you mentioned Majestic Princess, which is the third of a series of 6 ships that we're right now in the process of building for Princess Cruises. They're being built over in a place called Monfalcone, which is in the eastern part of Italy, near a city called Trieste. And the Majestic Princess was the third in the series. And we started about 4 years ago to make fairly significant investments in China in particular. I now have, I think, 12 offices in China and several hundred employees over there, and we have ships trading year-round in China. So we said, let's take this Majestic Princess and purpose-build her for the Chinese customer. So you start tweaking the product, you start looking a little bit at what is it that Chinese customers are desirous of, what does the language needs look like, the entertainment, the food, the product, and so forth. And you start building that into the hardware, and this is not a small ship. This is a ship that takes 3,500 passengers and costs $650 million to build. So you want to try to be as correct as you can in the process, and realizing that this has a 20-year or plus lifespan. So it's really fun to do, and then when it comes to fruition, and we got to deliver her earlier this year and have it with great fanfare. Yao Ming, the former basketball star, and his wife were the godparents of the ship, and we had huge festivities over in Shanghai. It's fun to be part of that kind of stuff.
Can you give us one example of how that experience on that ship will be different from some of the other ships?
So obviously there's a lot of Chinese language that takes place. Therefore the entertainment is entirely geared to the Chinese customers. It has an incredible array of shops, brands that we would recognize, international brands, but Chinese like shopping quite a lot. It's slightly larger casino operations, slightly smaller spas, because the Chinese don't use quite the same number of Western spa experiences. It has a lot of karaoke rooms, things like that. So it's about building something for a customer audience, and that's part of what we do. Our sourcing now is so global. We have millions of customers all over the world. So when you go with a dedicated product to a country the size and the might of China, you have to try to figure it out and be as correct as possible. I know you know a lot about that, being a Japanese background and so forth. And you got to tailor the product. We're the largest travel company in Japan, believe it or not. I have 275,000 customers from Japan. It's amazing, and they travel on our ships, and we have tweaked those ships to accommodate the Japanese customers.
Thanks so much, Stein. I think we're going to open it to questions from the audience in the back there. Oh, sorry. Maybe start with him, just so you don't have to walk quite as far right away.
Oh, thanks. It's very interesting to find what's become of Holland America. I rode on a ship called the Waterman from Montreal to Rotterdam in 1960 as an exchange student, and I'd be interested to know how did Holland America expand from with that small footprint that I saw more than 50 years ago?
So the Holland American Line brand still exists very much so. The Holland America Group is just a sort of more of a parent company, if you will. Holland American Line today has 14 ships. We are investing into it very significantly. Right now we have 2 ships under construction. They're $530 million apiece, so it's about $1 billion capital commitment into the Holland American Line. It's continued to grow by deploying the ships globally. Very solid foundation, very product consistent, great deployment in terms of itineraries. The onboard experiences very rewarding, and the company continues to go from strength to strength. For a period, it looked like it would go under in the late '60s with the advent of the jets coming across and the sort of the change in the transportation methods back then. But Holland American Line bought a small company here in Seattle called West Tours, which had experience in taking customers to Alaska. And gradually, West Tours did better and better, and Holland American Line did worse and worse. And they asked the then head of Holland America to come to New York, where Holland America was headquartered, and run the combined entity. And he said, no, but if you shut down Holland America in New York and you move 20 people over to Seattle, I'll run everything from Seattle. And that's what they did in 1981. And the rest is history.
I just had a quick question for how the Jones Act affects your company and its products in the United States.
So the Jones Act, for those of you who are not aware of what that is the a rule from 1926 that basically prohibits the transfer of goods or people between 2 ports in the United States. It's applicable to not just ships, but also to airlines. It's why you, for instance, cannot fly British Airways from Los Angeles to New York. You can only fly international carriers from one place to somewhere else outside the US. So we cannot sail customers between, say, Seattle to Los Angeles. And that has been the law since 1926, and we do very well with the Jones Act in place. So we don't really have a strong opinion on it. It's the law of the United States. If the law changes, then we'll adapt to that.
I'm a serial Holland America customer and very satisfied. I wonder if you could talk about 2 changes that are happening. One is, and how that impacts this really interesting, diversified set of cruise companies. One is climate change, and the other is generational change.
Oh, we have very limited time, so I'll be very brief. Climate change is clearly happening. It is not something that we can do a whole lot about other than try to continue to improve on our energy efficiency. That is both something we should do because it makes a lot of sense from an ecological point of view, but also it makes business sense. By being more energy efficient, you reduce your energy footprint and you probably save some money in the process. But as climate change happens, we will obviously look at that and see if it makes global deployments even more attractive. I mean, for instance, the Northwest Passage is one that is near and dear to us. We're not ready to start going through the Northwest Passage yet. We think there are a few small ships that can do that, but taking big ships through the Northwest Passage has just too much of a risk profile. But we will look at what deployment opportunities the change in the climate has, and then hope that we and others in small ways can contribute to sort of stemming that tide, if you will. Generational change, that's an interesting one. The baby boomer generation is still the majority of the cruise passengers, but the next generation is coming, and tailoring both the marketing, the communications, and the product to that next generation is both fascinating and complicated, because as looking at the audience here, many of you have kids and some of you have grandkids, and I have kids, they're in their 20s now. They're different than us, and They act differently, they respond differently, they communicate differently, they have a different set of gauging value, they respond differently to outreach, so it's actually both fun and challenging, and something that our marketing departments across my 6 brands are working on every day.
Over here? Oh, I'm sorry.
You may have answered my question with the last one, but I would assume that the vast majority of your clientele are affluent senior adults. Is that Accurate?
Not really. For The Holland America brand, we probably have a fair number of what you categorize as, well-to-do, affluent seniors. Seabourn is also more skewing towards near or at retirement and very affluent. Cunard, a little bit. Princess, not so. Princess is much more a contemporary audience, mostly still active, working life. P&O Cruises in the UK, a little bit more akin to Holland America and Cunard, but slightly more down market than, say, Cunard at the luxury level. And in P&O Australia, it's just like a party crowd. I mean, it's a bunch of Aussies that are out to have a fun time. So yeah, Ken knows who they are.
Over here. Stein, thanks for joining us. I think you mentioned at the beginning that you came into the company in a leadership track, and so I assume you were, groomed and developed to move up the ranks. Could you talk about that process and/or what it would be like at the company if you didn't have a formal career progression program?
Yeah, sure. So my background, I kind of meandered after the management training and my education. Did several different companies, but mostly in the cruise industry. So I kept growing my career, and I was hired by Holland American Line in 1999. I was living on the East Coast at the time, and my wife and I had settled very comfortably on the East Coast, and our kids were at the time 5 and 3, and I kept getting these calls from Holland American Line saying, it's a great opportunity, come here. And I finally agreed to come, and my title at the time was Senior Vice President. I was in charge of operations, new building, technology, and hotel operations. And at the time, my predecessor, who was the CEO at the time, was at a point where he was starting to look at his successor. And 3 years later, I was named president, and a year after, I succeeded him as CEO. So I was here for 4 years. And then during the period from I became CEO in 2003 until I started changing the company significantly in 2011. The only major thing I did was probably contribute 2 or 3 new ships to the company, and I sold a company called Windstar, which we owned at the time. It's still based here in Seattle, smaller company. It didn't fit quite the profile. And then in 2011, I with the support of the board, I started making some fairly dramatic changes, and so this is where we are today.
Quick question. I'm interested in your prospective customers from China. I assume they don't have the Jones Act. Will your customers in China be traveling throughout China, or where do they want to go?
So the Chinese market is very nascent. It doesn't really have a distributed travel network like we do here in the United States. And the concept of cruise is very novel. It's when I say, go on a cruise, most of you have some, mental image of what that looks like or what that would be like, or many of you probably have sailed on a cruise or been on one of the ships that I operate. In China, that doesn't exist. So it's a very different market. We have short cruises because the Chinese don't have a lot of time. They work a lot, and their vacations are very short, could be as little as 3 or 4 days. So our ships generally sail from either Shanghai or a place called Tianjin, which is close to Beijing, and then they sail just across the sea to Korea, South Korea, and across to southern Japan. And we can do a 3 or 4 day cruise round trip from Shanghai or Tianjin to Korea and Japan, which they love. They go to Korea and Japan and they do some shopping, a little sightseeing, and they get to experience these beautiful ships that we have running over there. And they are everybody. They are cross-section of office workers, people from large state-owned companies, some private, some girlfriends taking trips, and other things like that. Very interesting market.
Last question.
Ken, do we one last question?
Thank you. Yeah, it's real brief and real short. My wife would like to go on the QE2 for about 2 weeks. I need a price on that. And yeah, for real.
Call your travel agent.
Right, I figured you could. And number 2, what is the differentiator? As a leadership scholar, I want to know what separated you out from all the other great people at the company? What made them put you in charge? What is it about you that makes you the right man for the job? Thank you.
Talk about putting me on the spot here. Obviously, I don't know all the reasons why I was selected and why I've been given this great opportunity. I think a little bit of what I said earlier, I don't shy away from doing the things that are necessary. I believe that I have an ability to communicate with people in a very open, transparent way. I believe fundamentally in morality and ethics and doing the right thing. I believe that management do things right and leaders do the right things, and doing the right things generally brings with it good things. So I'm sort of steadfast. Once I have listened, and I'm a good listener, and we make a decision, then I see it through. I don't allow complexity to get in the way of execution, but I'm very big on execution. I don't let people fail because they didn't execute properly. So once we have a plan, we execute according to the plan, and we make course corrections along the way. I could go on about all that, but you know, I'm just lucky and privileged and thankful to be where I am, and I'm privileged and lucky and thankful to be here today, and thanks for the invite. Sorry about stepping in lieu of General McCaffrey, but you know, as a guy like me, I don't have a lot to do, so I'm usually available on short notice to be called in. And
thanks so much, Stein. Thanks for the wonderful.
So I'm about to do something that has not been done in our 107-year history as an organization. I'm going to end with a tweet, but it's a good one, from our friend Howard Behar, who kicked off our year in terms of our leadership series on servant leadership. I follow Howard on Twitter. You guys should too. Howard tweets this out. It's a picture of a chairlift on a mountaintop, and it says simply, "Servant leaders rise by lifting others." And we are adjourned.